25 past the hour. Joining us now, the host of MSNBC's Politics Nation and president of the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton. Great to have you with us. Rapper Snoop Dogg is offering an apology to journalist Gayle King following backlash over his comments appearing to, well, he did threaten the CBS This Morning anchor for asking questions about the late Kobe Bryant's 2003 rape case in an interview with WNBA star Lisa Leslie.
Two wrongs don't make no right. When you're wrong, you gotta fix it.
So with that being said, Gayle King,
I publicly tore you down by coming at you in a derogatory manner based off of emotions, me being angry at questions that you asked.
Overreacted.
I should have handled it way different than that. I was raised way better than that. So I would like to apologize to you publicly for the language that I used and calling you out of your name and just being disrespectful. I didn't mean for it to be like that. I was just expressing myself for a friend that wasn't here to defend himself.
A lot of people look up to me.
And they love me and they appreciate me, so I want to let them know that anytime you mess up, it's okay to fix it. It's okay to man up and say that you're wrong. I apologize. Hopefully we can sit down and talk privately. Have a good day.
Joe, you go first.
So, yeah, well, listen, it was a pretty straightforward apology, a complete apology. I thought it was a complete apology. I know you have a slightly different take on it, but you know, I think we all screw up. We all mess up, and when we do, we need to step forward and apologize. And the part of that apology, I mean, he said he overreacted. He apologized fully. He was being disrespectful, and he said he needed to, quote, man up and apologize. He did, and I thought the best part of it was when he said that they needed to get together and talk privately, which I'm sure at some point they will, though I'm sure this is still very, very raw for Gayle. She's been through hell over the past week, and I know she has to be disillusioned by people that she thought were friends who sat by and said absolutely nothing. I know she has to be disillusioned. I know she has to be disillusioned by newspapers like the New York Times and others who claim to be such champions of journalistic freedom and protecting journalists. They talk about protecting journalists worldwide, but they don't even protect one down the street when her life is threatened. It's very strange, this conspiracy of silence to protect and defend a black female journalist. I'm ready to move past Snoop and what he said. I'm far more focused on this complete dereliction of duty by opinion writers, by media figures, by leaders, both black and white, who have refused to step forward and speak truth to power. We have one of the few on this set who have, and that's, of course, Reverend Al. So what do you think, Mika?
Well, I don't think those folks are off the hook just because Snoop delivered this
they're not
so-called apology. I think it was an apology in some ways, but it wasn't in others, and here's why. First of all, it's quite a turnaround, okay, from what he put out there, and it took a week, which is problematic. When you've done something wrong, you know it right away, and you get right out there, and you do not give any excuses for it, and his first line gave an excuse. Two wrongs don't make a right. Let me explain why that's problematic. He left Gayle hanging in an area that's quite important to all of this, which I'll let the Rev talk about. Two wrongs don't make a right? No. That's not okay. And that kind of undermines the entire apology. The other thing is, you know, you have to wonder why it took a week. What is it that made him think for a week about this before coming out with this? And what he did when he tore Gayle down and threatened her with a profanity-laced tirade is he divided people. And he knew he was doing that. He knew he was ginning up division. It's not a good look at all. So I think he's going to need to do more. I think it's a good start. But a lot needs to happen before this really is, quite frankly, in a place of peace.
No, well, I'm sure Gail feels the way you do right now. I'm sure she's still very raw about this. I do know that we have a president who refuses to apologize at all times, who refuses to ever admit he makes mistakes. And I think, Rev, when you have somebody stepping forward and saying they need to, quote, man up and apologize and say that they're sorry and they behaved poorly, I think we need to accept that apology. Of course, it's up to Gail ultimately to personally accept that apology. But you know what? We need to salute people who make mistakes. We've all made terrible mistakes. Mm-hmm. And you know what? It's at the end of the day, it's all about grace. And hopefully Snoop and Gail can get together and he can offer words to her and she can provide grace back to him. But for now, I'm just glad this example was sent out to the 39, 40 million people that follow Snoop on Instagram.
It was important because it sets a cultural tone that you do not have to be engaged in threats and misogyny. I think beyond Gail and Snoop, what concerned me was the message it was sending to a lot of people that listen to Snoop and that impacted by it. And I think that they got a real education, and I hope this is a teaching moment that Snoop will use to say to them, it is not the manly thing to do to call women out their name and to threaten women and journalists for what they say. If he had said he felt it was inappropriate or harmful to him, the way she conducted the interview, whether you or I agree with that or not, he had the right to say that. But to dehumanize her and to use misogynist terms and to threaten her was my concern. And, someone stopped me in the street just yesterday when I got off this show and said, I'm glad you stood up for Gail. I said, I didn't stand up for Gail. I stood up for my daughters. I stood up for people everywhere. Gail doesn't need me to stand up for her, but there are young people all over this country and older people as well that I've marched for that should not be called out their name, and we act like that's all right. And I'm so happy that it was validated and supported by Snoop. And just like we took Snoop on, we ought to give him his props and praise him for standing up and hopefully use this as a teaching moment to many of his fans that to man up means to really be a man, and to be a man is to not disrespect women.
Yeah, I just want to follow up with what you said, Rev, and talk about what we heard from Karine Jean-Pierre and what we heard from Yamiche Alcindor, two very talented black professional women who were worried about the example that this was setting. And Al, I don't, maybe you can help explain, because I don't understand why major media outlets, why organizations, why politicians, why white and black politicians remain silent while a black female journalist had her life threatened and was the victim of misogynistic attacks simply for asking a question, which, again, you're right. We can have that debate. We should have the debate. Listen, we didn't bring that up the morning after he died when we did Kobe coverage. Maybe we would 6 months from now when we're talking about his legacy with somebody like Mike Lupica, but we didn't do it. So you can have that debate. But I'm just talking about the conspiracy of silence. Why did people who always so fiercely speak out against attacks against the media were just silent and refused to lift their heads out of the sand on this?
I wish I could help you with that. It is inexcusable because you're dealing with a top-rate journalist that was threatened and that was the victim of a misogynist attack, and they said nothing. And I think that they have to really explain that to themselves. I said to some of the people at National Action Network's office yesterday, I understand. I've been controversial all my career. In your civil rights, you're going to be that. I understand them not saying something if it was me. But Gayle King? I mean, Gayle King is like top-tier A-list journalist, objective, not controversial. And you're not going to say anything about Gayle King. But that's why you have women's movements and LGBTQ movements and civil rights movements and people like me because we speak when other people are silent and force them to say something.
This is when you step up.
That's when you step up.
Good.
And that's why we become controversial, because we'll say what those safe people won't say.
That's right. Still ahead, Michael Bloomberg has hit third place in a series of national polls. Thank you, Rev. But now he's finding himself at the center of a few controversies. First, it was a stop and frisk policy, and now he's feeling the heat over comments he made at the height of the financial crisis. We'll talk about how it could impact his candidacy next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.